Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, September 14th, 2011. It's 5:05 p.m. We're at the Palm Coast Community Center for a regularly scheduled budget meeting for the Palm Coast City Council. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mayor Nutz?
Here.
Vice Mayor Meeker?
Here.
Councilmember DeStefano?
Here.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember Mormon?
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you very much. First item on our agenda is a resolution setting the tentative millage rate for fiscal year 2011-2012. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, it's been a very long budget season, if you will. Towards the beginning of this budget season, Mr. Britt informed me that he was planning on retiring. You will see in front of you tonight his formal letter saying that he is retiring. But Ray did agree to get us through this difficult budget year. We all knew it was going to be a difficult budget year because as you see property values and therefore revenues decrease 4 years in a row going into the fifth year, it really becomes more and more difficult each year. And we went through a very lengthy process this year. Ray started off with kind of some informational sessions in front of City Council to try to help both the council and the public understand the process and why it's complicated and difficult. And then we gave City Council a number of options and worked through the process to come up with a proposal. That proposal including public hearing when we set the maximum millage rate, number of workshops, a number of comments from the public. And because Ray has done such an excellent job and it's kind of his farewell to the city, I have given him the privilege of presenting the proposed budget to City Council and the public tonight. So from there, lame duck, if you'll take it from here, I'd appreciate it.
And he's over there worried to death because he really ain't sure what's coming.
Oh, I kind of expected that.
There it is.
That I already know about.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and the public. This screen that I've got up here, the budget process starts very early in the year. This year we started around mid-March in the departments. Council most of the time doesn't really start seeing the budget till about July. This year we did start a little bit earlier. Y'all started having to listen to me about mid-May. The staff's had to put up with me for a couple of months longer than that. This was the email that I sent out in mid-March to kind of kick off the budget process with the staff. And hopefully everybody's had a chance to read it. I'm not going to read through it here right now, but if somebody wants to see it afterwards, it is on the agenda item, attached to the agenda item. But we do have a great group of people working here in Palm Coast, and they are good at finding ways to save money and get the job done any way they can. And I wanted to let them know that, but also wanted to give them a little something to, have to do. Actually, I started out each year with something different. One year I sent them a limerick. One year I wrote a scene out of a play for them and different things like that, just to start off the budget process with a little bit of humor because it can get real tough sometime. So anyway, we're going to get into the budget. This is the public hearing on the tentative budget for 2011-2012. Most of this stuff you have seen already. It's summarized a little bit more on some of it, but we're going to go through it fairly quickly, so if anybody does have any questions, just feel free to interrupt, or we can answer them at the end. As I said, y'all started having to listen to me in the middle of May, and these are all of the different meetings that I've done presentations at. We've had workshops and various things to do with the budget all the way through. You actually saw the total proposed budget at the August 23rd workshop, and again, this is our first public hearing. Just a quick review. We have a couple of different fund types, governmental and proprietary, with some subcategories under each one of those. Our governmental funds include our general fund, all of our little special revenue funds, and then a capital projects fund. Proprietary funds are all of our enterprise funds, which are things such as the utility and stormwater. Then we have internal service funds. We now have two, those being fleet management and the health insurance fund. City Council does three things: adopts the millage rate, adopts the fund appropriations, and adopts the estimated revenues. During the course of our workshops and presentations, with discussion with council, there were several goals that were taken out of that that we included in the budget proposal. One of those was to shift some revenue from the Streets Improvement Fund to the Stormwater Fund. Part of that was to try and diversify the stormwater funding. We also, up till this current year, there had always been part of the millage rate going into capital projects. 2011 did not include any millage rate in capital projects, so we wanted to reestablish that. It was decided that we would reestablish it, but we wanted to put it into stormwater this time instead of into the capital projects fund. We also had a goal to lower the millage rate from the proposed millage rate. We wanted to look at some additional expenditure cuts, mainly in the general fund, and we did not want to create any new tax revenue sources. Millage rate over the years has changed a little bit, but since 2007, our property values have gone down almost 38%. The operating millage, which is the general fund, actually has gone up about 42%, but the capital millage has come down about 40%. So total millage has gone up about 30 or 23%. However, the ad valorem tax revenues have gone down about 23.5% since 2007. So we are, even though the millage rate has gone up a little bit, the amount of revenue that we're getting from that is actually going down. Existing taxpayers over the last 5-year period, because of changes in property values and the millage rate changes that we've done over the years, because it did go down a couple of years, have seen about an $8.2 million savings on their property taxes. These were the various millage rate options that we had going in. You could have gone as high as 5.76 with a majority vote. However, at the August meeting, to set the proposed trim rate, you set it at 4, so that became your cap at that point, so you could go no higher than 4. The budget proposal that is in front of you tonight is using a tentative rate of 3.99 mils. Over the last 5 years, total staffing has declined by almost 27 positions, and that includes, we added 18 firefighters one year when the 2 new stations opened. So in effect, we really had cut about 45 other positions in other parts of the city. So we have seen a significant decline in the number of employees in the city. General fund, property taxes are actually going down in the general fund by about $1.7 million between 2011 and 2012. We're making up some of that by moving some revenues from the Streets Improvement Fund, some gas tax money from the Streets Improvement Fund, and also some state revenue sharing money. But in addition to that, we did cut almost $635,000 on the expense side in the general fund in order to get the general fund balanced. This is a little more detailed breakdown of the general fund, but you can see, looking at the total at the bottom, we're down about, well, down that $600,000 from the original budget in 11, and a little less also than the estimated budget for 2011. Over the 5-year period, general fund budget has actually dropped from about $33 million down to just under $26 million, so a little over $7 million decrease in the general fund. Enterprise funds, the utility fund is pretty much status quo. It is less than the original budget for this year. It's almost exactly the same as what the estimated budget is for 2011. Stormwater Management Fund, a little bit higher this year. Of course, this is one of the areas we're trying to focus on. Actually, all of the increase was the increase in debt service, but within the Stormwater Fund, we have been able to find ways to work more efficiently by bringing things in-house and those types of things, doing a lot of the work with city crews, and we've now got a pretty good system going in there and are actually able to accomplish more for the same amount of money. The building permits and inspections is, the revenues are all from permit fees, and right now we are pulling down the fund balance in there as planned with the agreement that we had approved about a year and a half ago now. Information technology, this was actually over budget for 2011. However, that was because of the new contract with the school board, which we had to do some capital expenditures in order to get them all hooked up that we had not originally budgeted. That will be offset by the revenues coming in from the school board contract. For 2012, we moved $300,000 from the capital projects fund over to this fund, which is the payment that we make to the county for the 800 megahertz system. Otherwise, their budget for this year for 2012 would actually be less than it was for the current year. Fleet, again, this is one of our internal service funds. As you can see, capital expenditures are expected to be almost half of what they were for 2011. The other thing that's impacting this fund somewhat is the cost of fuel. Yes, the city is impacted whenever the gas cost goes up. So we did see a significant jump in fuel cost within this fund. This is just a breakdown of the departmental cost within the fleet fund. Some vehicles in here, some equipment such as tractors and some heavy equipment that needs to be replaced. Other capital funds, and most of these you won't see a whole lot of activity going on in these funds. The Park Impact Fee Fund, we're just finished, expect to have the last few dollars of finishing up the Graham Swamp Trail. Fire Impact Fee Fund, no projects planned in there for quite a while. Transportation Impact Fee Fund, no projects for the next couple of years in there at least. And of course, most of those is just because we really don't have much impact fee money coming in at this point in time. Old Kings Road Special Assessment, which is the 4-lane Old Kings Road, again, that's not expected to happen anytime soon. The Streets Improvement Fund is one fund that we do have some activity in. There is still the half-cent sales tax money goes into the Streets Improvement Fund. That will go toward resurfacing, as it usually does. There are some other small projects in there. And then we get down, you see Palm Coast Parkway 6-laning there at the bottom. And then over on the next page here, got the Old Kings Road extension, North Old Kings Road 4-laning, North Pine Lakes Parkway improvements. Most of those are covered by grants, not all except for the North Pine Lakes Parkway improvements. The rest of those are covered by grants. So, that's where the revenue's coming for that. The Pine Lakes Parkway improvements and bridge rehab will come out of the revenues, such as the half-cent sales tax. There is still some state revenue sharing money staying in this fund. And maybe a little bit of the gas tax money staying in here too. Capital Projects Fund, again, there's really no revenue going into this. This is where the part of the millage used to go. So there's a couple of small projects, and the sidewalks and bike paths are mostly covered by grants also. That's the only revenue source really coming into this fund for 2012. Everything else is just using money that's already there. And then a couple other kind of ongoing projects, the Parkway beautification and some work we need to do on Long's Landing, and then some money that we put in for park renovations. State Road 100 CRA, we have some money in there for possible property purchases, and then to do the design and maybe begin construction on Bulldog Drive. But of course, toward the end of the budget process, there was discussion that that plan's probably going to be modified a little bit. So so those numbers will probably change during the year. Utility Capital Projects Fund, this is funded by a transfer from the operating fund, impact fee money, and there's still some bond money in there from the 2007 bond issue. However, this fund, the amount of projects that are going on there have decreased significantly for 2012. Well field and wells, we always seem to be putting down a few more wells. Water treatment plant number 2, that is the zero liquid discharge project that we've talked about just in the past couple of weeks at the workshop, and actually all approved that contract, I believe, last Tuesday. And then just some other ongoing capital that is pretty much continuous in the Utility Capital Projects Fund. Stormwater, we went over this in great detail in several different times, but this is just a list of the projects that are being done out of the Stormwater Fund. To summarize, the total budget, and you didn't see all of these funds listed. Most of these are just the small special revenue funds. The revenues come in, they are designated for specific purposes, such as the police education and automation. That is designated by state statute and can only be used for certain things. On down toward the bottom, third up from the bottom, the Neighborhood Stabilization Fund, that was the NSP grant money that we got. That's in a special revenue fund. Solid Waste Fund, we didn't mention. That is, of course, just kind of a pass-through fund. We collect the money. It is, most of it is paid out to the contractor. Some does stay in that fund, and some of it goes to the general fund as a franchise fee. Golf course fund, tennis center fund, those are contractual arrangements with Kemper Sports that manage those for us. And the new fund this year was the health insurance fund, and that is an internal service fund. Total budget is about $120.4 million. When we back out the interfund transfers and charges, the budget amount is actually $106.3 million. That's compared to a 2010-11 budget of about $176 million. And since I made Jim point out that $50 million of that was the Old Kings Road Special Assessment, even once you back that out, last year's would have been $125 million. So the 2012 budget is about $20 million less than the 2011 budget. Okay, tonight you are holding your first public hearing and adoption of the tentative 2012 millage rate and budget. And then we will be proposing on September 27th to hold the final public hearing and adoption of the final 2012 millage rate and budget. Okay. I realized that I set expectations very high by quoting Machiavelli early on in this whole process, about the second presentation I did. And what we were talking about a lot has been perception versus reality, appearance versus what's actually happening. I ran across another quote that kind of fit in with that. This isn't Machiavelli, it's John F. Kennedy, where he said, "The great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. Belief in myths allows the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought." And so I'll just kind of wrap up by saying that I hope if nobody got anything else out of anything I said over the past 4 months now, that people kind of walk away with, I need to kind of think about things a little bit. Over the next couple of years, there's a lot of decisions that are going to have to be made at all levels of government in this country, both our local, state, federal, and I really hope people take the time and do whatever they can to find out the answers for themselves. Don't just rely on what people say or what people tell them, and try and research and find out some of the answers for themselves, and base their decision on that rather than just things that they hear that may or may not be true. They may be myths that sound good, but they may not really be the truth. So, I hope people will do that. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I will turn it back.
Thank you very much. We're preparing now for the first of the budget hearings. The City of Palm Coast proposes to levy a millage rate of 3.9900 mils. This is a 1.61% decrease from the rollback rate of 4.0552 mils. That statement is required by law. Are there any questions from council before we open the hearing to the public?
Please.
Hearing none, we'd like to open the meeting to the public. Any from the public wish to be heard on the proposed millage rate? Please give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. Dennis Cross, 47 Front Street. I support the repairs in the budget for the stormwater system, but I have 3 questions on the funding. And Mayor, I'm going to give you a list of these 3 questions, so you really don't need to write them down as you normally do.
Okay.
Number 1, the budget increases the millage rate 45 cents per thousand for stormwater repairs, which yields an additional $1.7 million in revenue. The stormwater budget in 2011 was $7.4 million, and the budget for 2012 is the same $7.4 million. No increase. My question is, why isn't the stormwater budget being increased from $7.4 million to to at least 9 million, since an additional 1.7 million is being collected for that purpose. That was question 1. Number 2, this budget collects $8 a month from residents as a stormwater fee on their utility bill and another 45 cents per thousand in their tax bill for stormwater. Question: isn't this double taxation for the same service? And my last or third question: people who were outside the city stormwater district who received no benefit from the city's stormwater system were awarded refunds back to April 2008 because of a legal challenge. My question is, since these people will now be taxed for a service they still do not receive, will there be further legal risk to the city? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to pass this one to Ray, but next speaker.
Yes, good evening, Vincent Liguori, Palm Coast. I do have some questions. I guess the first question I have is perhaps to clarify my thinking of this. The Street Improvement Fund, as I remember the half cent, when we voted to install that, it was quite expressly stated by the council that would be dedicated solely for street resurfacing. Is that continue to be true? Or are these funds being transferred into Stormwater Fund? If you can clarify that for me, number one. Another very interesting thing that I've come across is that, and I'm sure you know about it, is that the city of Lake Worth has taken the first steps to install a $60 home assessment to pay for firefighter pensions. I've looked into the article, and I can't determine whether the council is trying to strike fear into the residents, saying that if we don't reduce pensions for firefighter, police, whatever it might be, we're going to have to assess it to your homes. I do hope that we have not thought about doing anything like this. I think it would be totally out of order. The third thing is just for information, we know that the economy is not going to improve, not by my say-so, but by the economists, that we may continue to see this malaise for another 2 years, or perhaps more. We're certainly seeing it here in Palm Coast. There ain't no jobs, to use the colloquial. There is no growth in our building. Yes, we have a new cancer center going up across from Golden Corral, I'm told. But my point is this: if we know we're going to have hard times, and the state says you can only go up to 10 mills, and we know there's hard times coming, why not do something to build up a cushion so that we don't have to raise the millage rates? What am I talking about? The local option sales tax of a half cent. I do not understand why we don't petition the county commissioners who can install this immediately, and why we don't use it. We would get approximately $2 million a year, the city of Palm Coast. You can turn it on and off whenever you want. But wouldn't it be wonderful going into the 2012-13 budget to say, we've got $2 million in reserve for any contingency or any shortage, and then after that, perhaps $4 million. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Oh, go ahead. Ladies first.
My name is Linda Fries. I'm a resident of Palm Coast. The last time I came in front of this group, I asked them all to try harder to live within your means. And this time I want to come and reiterate that, and maybe make a few points that help you understand where I'm coming from. And what I'm saying to you is, my city reminds me of the little old lady that watches Home Shopping Network all day long and spends all of her money on purses. And then when the pipes break, she doesn't have any money to spend to repair the pipes, and goes out begging for someone to help her. No one is saying that we should not repair our infrastructure. That's your job, to keep us safe and maintain our infrastructure. What we're saying is we need to do it within your means. Live within your means the way your citizens has to live within their means. And perhaps you think that some of the examples I'm going to show you are myth, but I don't think they're myth. One of the things that spending money, perhaps that doesn't need to be spent, the whole concept of boots on the ground. I was actually sitting in a board meeting the other day, and the subject came up that, did you see the city is cutting grass where no grass exists? All those little lawnmowers running up and down, there was no grass to be cut. I've watched the city mow lawns where nothing was evident that was being cut. Do we really need to cut our own grass, number one? Can we job that out? Number two, that little old guy that runs around on a Sunday afternoon picking up signs, how much do we pay that guy? Double time? Triple time? All these things might seem to be small and insignificant. But the point is, there is perception out there that some of the things that the city is spending their money on is frivolous. You're buying too many purses and not living within your means. My opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Jack Carroll, Palm Coast. When they put the tennis courts up, they were supposed to be paid, and they're supposed to be able to contain themselves with whatever money's come in. I see we're putting in another $305,000 into the tennis courts. The last time was $70,000, if I'm not mistaken. When, I asked, when do we stop funding the tennis courts for a very few people that use it? I'm not denying them. I don't want to deny them, but pay your own way. I'm tired of subsidizing somebody else's amusements. How long will it take for the golf course to pay itself off? I'm not denying golfers, but pay your own way. If we have to subsidize these people, then I would like my taxes reduced so that I don't have to give these people my money so that they can go out on a Sunday and enjoy themselves while I pay you my taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Come back to some of the questions that were raised. Mr. Britt. The budget increases the millage rate for stormwater by 45 cents per thousand, which would yield $1.7 million in revenue. And yet there's no increase in the budget amount for stormwater. Can you explain this?
In 2011, we actually borrowed money, which made up part of that $7.3 million. Part of that was, about $2 million of that was actually borrowed. So what we're doing is replacing that with the ad valorem tax so that we don't actually have to go out and borrow money, which we then have to pay the debt service on. So that's really what it's doing, is just replacing the borrowed money.
The second question is, there is an $8 a month stormwater fee on residents, and then 45 cents per thousand in the tax bill. Is this double taxation?
Well, one of them is a fee and the other one's a tax, so I don't think you could say it's double taxation. It's also doing two different things. The $8 fee, and it was mentioned that people in Grand Haven were not paying that. People in Grand Haven are not paying that because they do not have swales. Their water does not run into our system. So the people that have the swales in front of their homes, or some of them may have underground pipes in front of their home, but those are the people that are paying the $8 fee. The ad valorem tax, as we discussed in the workshops, is intended to deal with some of the capital infrastructure, such as the pipe replacements that are under roads that the people in Grand Haven do drive on. And so, yes, they are receiving some benefit from that. But again, that is a property tax, and there's no direct connection between benefit received and the amount of tax paid. So, no, there would not be any legal issues either.
Okay. And the last question, it says, people who are outside the city stormwater district who receive no benefit from the stormwater system were rewarded refunds back to 2008. Since those people will now be taxed for a service that they did not receive, will there be further legal risks to the city?
And that's what I was just saying. No, because the taxes are not, and that's the purpose for taxes. Taxes pay for things that are services that are being provided that it's like fire service where it's difficult to charge an individual for a service that they receive. So that's what the taxes are for, and it's going to provide, or take care of our transportation system, which is part of that is those pipes under the roads. And the people do, even if they live in Grand Haven, they're still driving on Palm Coast Parkway and Belterra and other roads that have those pipes under them.
Okay. Now we move on to the question of the street improvement fund. This council, when that fund was first initiated, implemented, when that half-cent sales tax was approved by the voters, we said that we would dedicate that money 100% to street improvements. And I think I can answer that. The answer is yes, we have. The reality is, in the first year or so of that half-cent sales tax, the half-cent generated enough revenue to cover the cost of 50 miles. With the increasing costs of paving, the increasing costs of asphalt, from about the second or third year on, the half-cent sales tax did not generate enough money to do 50 miles. So we used other sources of revenue, local option and revenue sharing, to supplement that to achieve the 50 miles. Every penny of the half-cent sales tax this year is dedicated to street improvement, which is what we promised. And in fact, Mr. Britt points out that a portion, but a smaller portion, of those other revenue sources will also go to street improvement.
And if I may add, Mayor, all of the half-cent is still going into the Streets Improvement Fund.
Yes.
It is not going to any other fund. All of it is not being used for resurfacing this year because, again, in our discussions, it was, and we've had some people actually come say, why are you resurfacing my road? It was resurfaced 10 years ago. So it is going towards street improvements, but it's not actually resurfacing. There's $1 million worth of bridge replacement in there that's being done with that money, in addition to some resurfacing.
Meaning that there's a difference between road improvement and road resurfacing. Road improvement being a larger collective for a number of different items under that subject.
Right.
The second question from that speaker alludes to some local government proposing or initiating an assessment to cover the cost of firefighter pensions.
Yeah, we do
I guess
not.
the question, are we anticipating that? Do we anticipate that?
No, they probably have a defined benefit plan for their firefighters and police officers. We do not have a defined benefit plan. We have a defined contribution plan. That money is part of the payroll every week, and the city has no future liability for that, so there would be no need for us to have to do anything like that.
The speaker's third question, or suggestion, I guess, since there still is sales tax option available, why not discuss, negotiate, collaborate with the county to levy that sales tax and use that money to build a cushion? I think that's a philosophical question. Do you increase taxes on people now to build a cushion? I think probably most of the people that we've spoken to, heard from, would find that distasteful at best. But do you have any comments on that?
Well, I mean, we do have a reserve in the general fund, plus we've got our disaster reserve fund, so in case anything, major happens. As far as, having extra money, for the future to keep from having to raise the millage rate in the future or something like that, yes, that's just kind of a philosophical thing, whether you raise millage rate or you get taxes, from a sales tax. And I guess if I could just go on with that just a little bit. I know part of the argument with using a sales tax is, well, people outside the city that come into the city also pay that sales tax. And that's true. But if you stop to think about it, people from outside the city also contribute to the property tax. If they go stay in a motel, part of the rent that they're paying that night for that room is going to pay that motel's property taxes. Now, what the number is, or whether you get a little more from the sales tax than you would from the property tax portion of that I can't answer, and I don't know if anybody can. But that is one argument for going with the sales tax as opposed to a property tax.
Mayor, if I could add, I think another point that we talked about a great deal during this whole process was staying within our means and not use any of our reserves to make up the difference, so that we aren't using reserves, so the budget we have is staying within the actual revenue sources that we're collecting this coming year and not from the past, which makes the budget a lot more sustainable for the future, and that was one of the goals this year, last couple of years actually.
The next speaker talked about living within our means and acknowledges the need to maintain or repair infrastructure, but was concerned about what appears to her to be unnecessary expenditures. Cutting grass that doesn't need cutting, having code enforcement available on the weekends, and so on and so forth. Again, I think, unless Mr. Adams has any comments on cutting grass that doesn't need cutting, I think it's a question of providing services, maintaining the city, maintaining the infrastructure of the city, maintaining the appearance of the city. Economic revival is going to depend to a great extent on maintaining a city as a place where people want to come, want to move to, want to visit, and I think that's what we're trying to do. We've experimented in the past with cutting out code enforcement on the weekend, and the results were unsatisfactory, at least to City Council.
And that person that works on the weekend is scheduled for the weekend. They do not work during they only work 5 days, so they're on straight time. They're not on overtime, double time, triple time, or anything like that. They're just on straight time.
If I could point out, they're not just on pickup sign duty. Those are code enforcement officers who are in the neighborhoods. And as City Council knows, and a lot of our neighbors know, is that code enforcement is actually quite busy on weekends as people are home and can have some different behaviors than during the work week. So want to point out that those people are code enforcement in the neighborhood. If I could address the grass mowing a little bit also, please. We do have a combination of city crews mowing grass, and also we contract with a local lawn maintenance company, Fox Landscaping, to mow grass. So we've tried to do a balance there. I'm not sure the individual said we're mowing where there is no grass. Lots of times I think it is that perception. I can look outside my window and see that grass is not growing on Cypress Point Parkway median, and there are people mowing that. That is not maintained by the city. That is actually maintained by the business association in that area. So once again, you have to give us specifics, and it's not always what it looks like, and that's a case where I think they are maintaining it well, but they don't irrigate it to keep those costs down. So.
And the last speaker talked about some of the enterprise funds, the golf course, the tennis courts, and how long are we going to continue to subsidize those? And I think the answer is we subsidize the lacrosse fields, the soccer fields, any number of amenities that are provided by the city to make us the kind of city that we are.
And if I could correct one thing, the 300,000 that he mentioned is the total budget for the tennis center.
And the offsetting revenues?
That includes the revenues. This current year, we're looking, for 2011, we were going to transfer about $145,000 in there to supplement. For 2012, we're only expecting to transfer about $99,000 in there. So that number is going down. It's headed in the right direction. This was actually the first year that Kemper had operated the tennis center for us, and it seems to be going in the right direction. So, hopefully within the next few years, maybe it will, continue to go down.
Same news for the golf course?
The golf course is already paying for it. Well, it's paying for its operations. As far as paying back the capital cost, that one is going to be, a lot longer time before that happens, and I can't really even give you an answer on that.
But there are no tax dollars going towards the operation of the golf course in this coming year budget.
Right.
It is totally funded by revenue generated at the golf course.
Okay. I think we've dealt with all the questions that were asked. We're now at the point of proposing to adopt a millage rate of 3.9900. Is there?
I'll propose to adopt the millage rate.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Okay, we have adopted a millage rate. The City of Palm Coast proposes to adopt a budget with total appropriated expenditures and reserves of $120,417,494. At this point, I'd like to open the meeting to the public for anyone who would like to speak about the adopted budget or the proposed budget. I'm sure it's not adopted yet.
Jack Carroll, Palm Coast. I'm bringing up the same subject again. If we still, regardless of where the money is coming from, it's still coming into our budget. And it's coming out between the golf course and the tennis courts over $1.5 million. That money could be used for something else. Even though you're saying it's coming, if it's coming from the people and it's self-sufficient, then why is it on the budget? If it's self-sufficient, why isn't it just a minus or a deduction? Because I want to know one thing. Since the golf course, not golf course, since the tennis court's opened, how often have we raised the prices to play? I don't think we raised it at all. Now, when I go to the supermarket, they raise the price of food, and I pay for it. I don't come back to the city and say, no, it's costing me more money for food, subsidize me. No, I pay my own way. Now, if a guy wants to go out and play tennis, play golf, let him pay his own way. I still don't think we should subsidize anybody for sports, regardless of what it is. Now, you mentioned the soccer fields, and we don't subsidize them. When somebody pays to play something, then he should pay to play. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Dennis Cross, 47 Front Street. Just a point of clarification. The half-cent sales tax question for road repaving, just clarify for me. My understanding was the half-cent sales tax generated $2.5 million. This year, we're spending $726,000 on road repaving because the roads are in good shape, so they need to come down. My question is, that leaves us with $1.7 million surplus from the sales tax. My question is, how is that being used within this budget? How is that $1.7 million now being applied? Does it have to stay on streets, or what other utilities or what other functions is that surplus $1.7 million being used for? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, why don't we take the second question first?
Okay, The Streets Improvement Fund, right, $726,000 is being appropriated for street resurfacing. All the projects in the Street Improvement Fund are street-related. So really anything in there could be paid for with that money. We do have $1,050,000 appropriated to rehab one of the bridges, which is transportation related. We do have $2.2 million in here for North Pine Lakes Parkway, which is street, and that is not being funded by grant. As I said, some of these other projects are Palm Coast Parkway, Old Kings Road Extension, and North Old Kings Road 4-laning are being covered by grants. But we actually have almost $4 million worth of projects in there that are street projects that are not being covered by grants. So that's where that money is being used.
The first question that we're now taking second harkens back, I believe, to the days of Mayor Canfield, who on a number of occasions felt that things like the water utility ought not be in the city's budget because it is a separate standalone enterprise fund. It should be a totally separate budget. And of course it is not. It is in the city's budget. Could you comment, please?
Well, yes, the same thing with the golf course and the tennis center. The expenditures are done by the city, even though we use a contractor to do it. It's still a city expenditure. It goes on our books. It's audited as part of our audit, all that kind of stuff. So council has to approve the appropriation, so therefore it has to be part of our budget. The revenues are also adopted by city council. In the case of the golf course, the entire expenditures are covered by fees that are paid by the golfers that use the course or the people that eat at the restaurant. They're the ones that are paying for it. No taxpayer money is going in there. In the case of the tennis center, the fees that they pay are paying for over half of the cost of that. So, but it still has to be part of the city's budget because it is money, it is still city money that is being spent. So therefore, city council has to appropriate that money.
Okay, and the last question, I don't know the answer. The fees for the tennis center, how have they changed up or down? How frequently, how recently? I don't know.
They have not changed, but that is one of the things that Kemper is working with the tennis, Friends of Tennis and people out there. I think you're going to see a revision in the fees at the tennis center based on what we're hearing. But
we had one at one time, did we? Was there a difference in cost between the family membership and?
The walk-on, yes, the day-to-day walk-on fee did go up. You're correct. You're correct on that, yes. I don't remember, it was like from $9 to $12 to come play for a few hours.
Thank you. Does council have any questions on the proposed budget?
None here.
If not, would somebody care to offer the proposal shown in step 4?
A motion to approve the budget as proposed at this time?
The city of Palm Coast proposes to adopt a budget with total appropriated expenditures and reserves of $120,417,494. Is there a motion?
That's the one.
Is the motion?
I second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Finally, the public hearing to adopt the final millage rate and budget is scheduled for September 27th, 2011, 5:05 p.m. at the Palm Coast Community Center. Again, this is a public hearing on the millage rate and budget, and that is the final public hearing. Even though it's not on the agenda, does anyone from the public have anything they wish to comment on that's not on today's agenda?
This is not towards the city council, but the people that are listening, right? They should be ashamed of themselves. When 49,000 people are registered voters and 5,000 people come out to vote, the public should be ashamed of themselves. Take part in your community, live your city, and I hope this is going on the air. Thank you.
If not,
It is, and
keep
thank you.
going. Yeah.
Mr. Manager, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, one moment.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, I'd just like to
Give
ask
us
a
your name,
couple...
please.
John Slawinski, Palm Coast. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. How much money is the city spending to have Palm Coast Parkway surveyed for widening of Palm Coast Parkway, if you know? Secondly, why doesn't the city hire a traffic engineer to work readjusting the timing on red lights? You want to widen Palm Coast Parkway, but I think if you hired a traffic engineer to readjust the timing on red lights, you may be able to increase your traffic flow in a more positive way as opposed to spending money on a survey. My other point is concerning surveys. My understanding from the Stormwater Department, the city will not accept a survey from a homeowner that's over 6 months old. Now, you're spending lots of money on survey for Palm Coast, widening of Palm Coast Parkway, and you're also doing the engineering study on the desal plant. Now, when you all are gone from office, you're going to have a new administration in here and new engineers. Now, quoting from your Stormwater Department, they will not accept a survey from a homeowner because of the margin of error. So you're going to tell the taxpayers in this town that when you widen Palm Coast Parkway, maybe 3-4 years from now, 5 years from now, same way with the desal plant, that mayor or that engineering company that you're going to, whoever they hire, is going to accept that survey and those engineering studies. Quoting you last meeting here, you're going to put it on a shelf. So to me, when there's a new administration or an engineering company comes in here to build that desal plant, if that would ever happen, they're going to accept those studies that are going to be 5 years old. So they're willing to accept that margin of error that the city will not accept from a homeowner. So I'd like to know, the question is, how much are you spending for the survey for Palm Coast Parkway widening, and how much have you spent for the desal plant that you're going to put on a shelf of taxpayer money? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we close the public portion of the meeting. Mr. Moden, is that a correct statement that the Stormwater Department will not accept a survey that's over 6 months old?
Well, the building department will not accept the survey.
My understanding is if you apply for a building permit to build a house on a lot, you have to have a current surveys, and that current survey means within 6 months. In other words, a registered surveyor has to go out and lay out the property lines, make sure there are no encroachments and things of that nature.
Okay.
And that's the 6 month.
Right, thank you. The cost of the PD&E study that's being done for the widening of Palm Coast Parkway, do we know the amount? Do we have that offhand handy?
Well, I can tell you it's all state and federal dollars. It's grant. I don't believe there's any city tax dollars in that widening project whatsoever. It's fully funded by the grant dollars. It's a state project.
And the timing of the surveys is a DOT
right.
issue.
It's all, and actually the construction of the improvements is funded currently. So as soon as the design's finished, they have it is programmed in their funding sources to start the widening of the street.
Okay. And as far as the issue of a traffic engineer to do traffic light timing, we have done that on a number of occasions. You can only get so many people across an intersection in a given amount of time. If you change the timing of the green duration on Palm Coast Parkway, then you start to build up a backlog on Old Kings Road or Florida Park Drive or whatever intersection there is. It's always a question of a compromise. We do have a traffic engineer who does do these kind of studies, and I believe that we're about as good as we're going to get, given the volume of traffic that we have.
Constantly looking at it and making adjustments, because as volumes, as traffic changes, depending on a variety of factors, trying to make those improvements. It is, Mayor, like you said, on Palm Coast Parkway, it's a constant effort to maximize the traffic flow through all those intersections.
It's also more than that. We do not have $1 million estimated cost computer software system with a bank of monitors and the staffing to monitor traffic through the entire city like they do down in New York. What we have is a timed system that is activated by pressure plates, and as soon as somebody pulls up perpendicular to that main road, you've activated a pressure plate and the whole system goes out of whack from there, and it's out from there on. That's one problem. The other problem is the length or the distance between stoplights. I've been told by some of the traffic engineers that I've talked to on this that if we went to traffic signals every half mile, we would be able to keep a slug of traffic moving through the intersections. The reason is you have those, like me, who tend to accelerate a little bit quicker off the line. Nothing illegal, of course. So I get there, and I get to the intersection first before the people in the back get there because they're, lagging behind. I've triggered that timer. It goes off. I end up going through the light. By the time they move up to me, the trigger's been reset and the light shuts down again. And unless we're willing to spend, and the estimate from this traffic engineer was about $1 million in the software program to make it happen and the upgrades, we're not going to have that level of sophistication.
Who says New York has it?
The
movie show it.
Discussion by City Council of matters not on the agenda. Anything?
Nothing, sir.
Discussion by City Manager? Mrs. DeStefano, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The comment about code enforcement on the weekend, I really have to address. I served on the Code Enforcement Board prior to being on the council, as well as Mr. Netz. I'm talking about 9-10 years ago, and the comments and criticisms we would get about the abuse, the violations of the code on weekends was deplorable. And we would just got so many, we had so many complaints that we both pushed to try to figure out how we could have people on weekends. And it did take us a while to figure out a system, and that is why we have the code enforcement on the weekend, and they are not getting overtime. And I think they're doing a dynamite job, and I think if you drive around the city, you'll see now, even on weekends, it has looked very presentable. So I think code enforcement's doing a great job, and they're really not just sitting on their laurels.
Something like that, but
Anything else?
no, I'm good.
Mr. Meeker?
No, sir.
Mr. Meeker?
I thought we were going to city manager, because Mary came first, then me, then manager, then...
City Manager, do you have anything?
Yeah, a couple of things, and I'm going to ask Mr. Beadle Chief Beadle, to give a little preview of the funeral we're having tomorrow that's going to change traffic patterns temporarily. But also since I didn't tell him, since I didn't warn him, I'll give him a little chance to think about it, and also remind everybody that this weekend our code enforcement / animal control employees, with the help of veterinarians and really a community event, is putting on a Cause for Paws at the Central Park from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And the idea is to help educate, help get the word out about the importance of spade and neutering and taking care of your animals, and giving them some tips as to how they can do that. So hopefully, people will come out Central Park on Saturday, have a good time, and also educational opportunity. We have what's turned out to be a very significant event here tomorrow, and I'll let Chief Beadle give you the details on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Landon. Our condolences to the Celico family. Tomorrow morning, beginning at 8 o'clock, Cypress Point Parkway will be shut down eastbound for emergency vehicle traffic coming in to attend the funeral. The procession is going to leave 10 o'clock tomorrow morning from Craig's Funeral Home on Old Kings Road, proceed 100 to US 1 into Bunnell. They're going to go past the family business in downtown Bunnell. US 1 north to Royal Palms, east on Royal Palms to Old Kings, up Old Kings, through the center of town. With the entire time, there'll be motorcycle escorts shutting down the intersections and so forth. They're going to go up Fleetwood Drive into the Fern Court where Sergeant Celico lived, then proceed to Florida Park Drive, back to the Parkway, back to Belterre, and back to Mother Seton Church. Big loop. After the Mass, approximately noon, between noon and 12:15, they'll leave the church, north on Belterre, back to the Parkway, east on the Parkway to Old Kings Road, and back down to the cemetery. There is anticipated a very large group of law enforcement officers coming into town early tomorrow morning for the procession, so there will be a lot of traffic in town.
Thank you.
Chief. Probably if you don't need to be out on the roads tomorrow, it's a good time to...
Probably in the morning is a good time not to go out unless you really need to, but yeah, there'll be a lot of traffic control, a lot of stopping, and a lot of options going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Last thing is my note just reminded me that the gentleman did ask about the cost of the preliminary engineering study for the desal. I just got word from Richard, he doesn't know those dollars, but if you'll connect up with him so that we can get that answer to him. Mayor, that's all I have for tonight.
Now, Mr. Meeks.
Now I'll motion to adjourn the meeting.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much for your participation.
Oh, thanks.